The sun rose like a slow-burning ember across the vast plains of Moringa, setting the tall grasses ablaze in hues of gold and amber. The morning air shimmered with life. Herds of antelope stretched their limbs. Hornbills fluttered from thorn trees, and the wide savanna awakened in a symphony of rustling wind and distant calls. It was in this moment of vibrant stillness that the chase began. Serena, a lone lioness hardened by hunger, stalked low through the tall grass. Her ribs showed faintly through her fur. Her steps careful, silent, steady. For 2 nights, her belly had been empty. For 2 nights, the hunt had failed. But today, she had found a target. A herd of Cape buffalo, dozens of them, their hulking bodies glinting in the sun, ambled across the open stretch near the dry riverbank. Calves trotted near their mothers. Older bulls lingered at the rear. Serena's golden eyes locked onto one calf, trailing slightly behind the others. She sprang. Muscles exploded into action. Paws slammed the ground. The herd jolted in surprise. But it was too late for a graceful escape. Dust kicked up in thick clouds. The calf bellowed. Mothers turned. But Serena had misjudged. She was fast, but not fast enough. And buffalo never forget, nor do they flee alone. A dominant female turned sharply. Followed by 3 others, they circled back. Horns lowered. Their bellows became war cries. Serena lunged at the calf. Claws out. But then she heard it, thunder behind her. She turned, saw the wall of muscle and horns charging. No time to finish the kill. No time to plan. She bolted. But one buffalo caught her flank, a hard blow that sent her tumbling into the brush. She scrambled to her feet. Blood dripping from her thigh. Pain pulsing from her ribs. With a final growl, she disappeared into the tall grass. Defeated, the herd regrouped and moved on, their hooves thundering into the distance. And in the silence that followed, beneath a tangle of reeds near the riverbed, a soft, desperate cry broke through the dawn. It was faint, the sound of a creature too small to be heard, too young to be alone. A lion cub, blind, barely days old. He mewed again, weak, cracked, pleading. But his mother did not return. Kito Mansa was making his usual patrol along the western edge of the reserve. Machete strapped to his back. Notebook in hand. The scent of rain lingered from the night before. And birds flitted through the canopy as he walked. He had spent most of his life in these lands. The Moringa Plains ran through his blood. As a ranger at the Majani Forest Rescue Center, his days were spent tracking illegal snares, checking camera traps, and ensuring the wildlife remained protected from poachers and encroaching farmlands. That morning felt ordinary, until he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind or the trees. Faint, high-pitched, helpless. A cry. He stopped, tilted his head. There it was again, barely audible, coming from the direction of the dry riverbed. He moved quickly but carefully, parting the reeds, scanning for movement. Then he saw it, a lump of golden fur, curled tightly beneath a bush. Kito knelt, his breath catching. A lion cub, no more than a week old. its eyes still sealed shut, its body trembling. Alone. There were no fresh adult prints nearby. No sign of Serena, only the scattered hoof marks of the buffalo herd. And a faint trail of blood leading into the thickets, the lioness. Wounded, likely forced to retreat far beyond reach. Kitto crouched lower, speaking gently in his native tongue. The cub whimpered again, shifting in the grass, its head bobbing unsteadily. Kitto removed his jacket and wrapped the tiny body with care, lifting it as if cradling something made of smoke. "You're not supposed to be here," he whispered. "Not alone." The cub snuggled closer to the warmth, instinct guiding him to the heartbeat beneath the fabric. Kitto stood, his face grim. This cub wouldn't survive the night. Not without a mother. Not in this wild. He tapped his radio. No signal. Didn't matter. His next stop was no longer the patrol post. It was the Majani Forest Rescue Center. The journey back was long and uneven. Kitto kept the cub pressed against his chest, shielding it from the wind. The sun had risen fully now, and the heat rolled across the land, drying the wet earth beneath his boots. In the distance, he saw a few giraffes moving lazily toward a grove of acacias. But his focus never shifted. Every few minutes, he checked the cub's breathing, still shallow, but steady. By the time he reached the gates of Majani, sweat clung to his back, and the fabric of his sleeves was soaked. A vet technician ran out as he passed the threshold. "Kitto, what's that?" He unwrapped the bundle just slightly, enough for them to see the faint flick of a tail, the soft movement of a paw. "A lion cub," he said, simply. Abandoned, injured pride nearby. Without another word, the staff took over. Hands worked quickly. Warm blankets, a bottle of formula, a heat lamp. The vet cleaned the cub's tiny paws and checked its breathing. Kitto stood at the window as they worked, arms crossed. He wasn't new to rescue. He had carried orphaned elephants, wounded antelope, trapped hyenas. But this was different. This one was meant to die. But he hadn't let it. Later that evening, as the stars broke across the Moringa sky, the cub lay asleep in an incubator, his chest rising and falling in slow, even waves. A name was scrawled in soft ink on the clipboard beside him. Leo. And somewhere far across the plains, beneath the dark canopy of a wounded jungle, Serena rested in silence, her flank aching, her body broken, but she had survived, and so had her son. For now, the Majani Wildlife Rescue Center sat at the edge of the forest like a quiet heart, beating gently in rhythm with the surrounding wilderness. Here, the forgotten came to heal animals that had been orphaned, injured, or pushed from the natural world by the slow creep of human interference. Inside Majani's fenced grounds were stories wrapped in fur, feather, and skin. A blind elephant named Nuru walked with the guidance of his younger sister. A rhino with a broken horn grazed near the acacia trees, his skin scarred but his steps steady. Birds too damaged to fly sang from the treetops, and a leopard missing one paw napped lazily in a hammock of sunlight and shade. And now, there was Leo. The tiny lion cub had arrived in a ranger's coat. carried through the front gates by Kitto Mansa himself. No older than a week. Eyes still closed. Voice barely more than a whisper. The staff had moved fast, setting up a heated incubator, testing his vitals, and feeding him a special formula through a small bottle every 2 hours. He was stable, but fragile. Every cry he made seemed to echo across the center. It was high and thin, like something breaking open, calling for a mother that would never return. And someone heard it, across the central courtyard of Majani, past the primate enclosure shaded by fig trees and bamboo. Amaya stirred. Amaya was unlike any other resident. A large, white-bellied ape. She had lived at Majani longer than most staff. She was quiet, almost eerily so, and rarely interacted with other primates. Her fur was silver in places. Her eyes deep amber with rings of pale gold. Her arms were long and graceful. Her movements slow but precise. She never fought for food. Never caused trouble. She was gentle, but she was also different. Genetic testing years ago had revealed a rare mutation. Amaya could never bear young. Whether by fate or biology, her womb would never hold life. And yet, she was often seen cradling things, large branches, old burlap sacks, even smooth stones. She treated them like infants, curling around him at night, rocking him slowly. Some found it tragic, others found it hauntingly beautiful. But Amaya had never cared for another living being. Not until Leo arrived. The first time she heard his cry. Amaya was lying in the corner of her enclosure, arms wrapped around a bundle of palm bark. Her head tilted at the sound. She stood, slowly, almost cautiously. She walked to the far end of the enclosure where the mesh fence faced the nursery unit. She saw nothing at first. But she waited. The next cry came. Amaya pressed one hand to the fence and sat down. She didn't leave that spot for hours. The next day, she returned again. And the day after that. Caretakers noticed. She was showing unusual behavior, abandoning her doll, refusing bananas, sitting almost perfectly still by the edge of her habitat, watching the window of the nursery. And then she began to whistle. Not loud, not shrill, just a soft, airy sound, more breath than voice. Rhythmic, gentle. The first time she did it, Leo stopped crying. The staff thought it was coincidence. The second time, Leo stirred. The third time, Leo settled almost immediately. That's when Kitto began to watch. He observed from the observation hut, camera in hand. Time and again, Amaya responded to Leo's cries with a whistle. She would hum softly through her lips, cock her head, and rock back and forth. Sometimes she even mimicked the motion of bottle feeding, curling her fingers around invisible shapes and raising them to her chest. It was unmistakable. Amaya was responding not with curiosity, but with instinct. A week passed. Leo grew stronger. His eyes began to open, 2 little orbs of pale green. He moved more during feedings, his paws flailing, his tail twitching. Amaya followed every step of his progress. The staff decided to test something. They brought Leo, wrapped securely in a soft cloth, to the viewing room where animals could see but not touch. Amaya was waiting at the glass. When Leo whimpered, Amaya pressed her forehead gently to the barrier. Leo quieted. The following day, the team tried again. This time, they let Amaya come to the fence that bordered her enclosure and the outdoor nursery pen. Under supervision, Kitto placed Leo inside a small, raised wooden box lined with blankets. Just close enough for Amaya to see. Amaya didn't rush. She approached slowly, dropped to all fours, and peered in. Leo looked up, eyes blurry, unfocused, and let out a soft squeak. Amaya reached her long arm through the mesh and did not touch. Only hovered her fingers close to his tiny paw. Leo reached out. His claws brushed the tips of her fingers. She didn't flinch. Then, slowly, she made that same sound again, a soft whistle. Like wind through bamboo. Kitto stood a few steps away. Frozen. Another caretaker whispered, "She's trying to soothe him." No one spoke for a long time. They simply watched. Amaya curled closer to the fence. Her body low and relaxed. Her face inches from the cub. When Leo whimpered, she pressed her head to the mesh. When he stirred, she stilled. When he slept, she rested her hand flat on the ground. Fingers spread wide, as if keeping watch. By the end of the week, the staff made a decision. They moved Leo's sleeping crate to a section near Amaya's enclosure, partitioned for safety, but within view. Amaya was given access to sit by the wall whenever she chose. She never left. Her food was brought to her. Blankets were laid down. The caregivers knew this was unprecedented and delicate, but something real was happening. Something wild and ancient and almost sacred. Kitto documented everything. Footage from the center's cameras began to circulate among conservation circles. A lion cub bonding with a barren ape. Not through training or force, but through instinct. Through something unspoken. The footage reached a university in Nairobi. Then a sanctuary in Uganda. Soon, news outlets began to call. But when Kitto was asked to comment, he said only this: "This isn't science. This is nature remembering something we forgot." One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Leo stirred from sleep. He made a soft, rasping cry, restless in his crate. Amaya was already there. She made no noise at first, just watched. Then she reached out through the mesh with both hands. Palms open, waiting. A caretaker brought the bottle and handed it to Amaya through a secured slot. She had watched enough by now. She held the bottle gently. Leo crawled forward, and without fear, he fed. Amaya supported the bottle with one hand and steadied the cub with the other, her fingers brushing his back. Her eyes half closed in concentration. As he drank, Leo's tiny paw curled around one of her fingers. Amaya looked down, and then, in the soft orange light of dusk, she touched her forehead to the fence. A cub that had lost his mother, an ape that had never had a child, and a bond that no one could explain, only honor. Leo was still fragile, though his cries had grown louder and his legs stronger. He remained a creature made of soft bones and untested breath. The bottle feedings came every 3 hours. His sleep was uneven, and sudden noises still made him shiver. But he was surviving. More than that, he was beginning to thrive. Each day, Kitto watched from the sidelines as the bond between Leo and Amaya deepened. Even through the mesh fence that separated them, Amaya no longer merely responded to Leo's cries. She anticipated them. She was always waiting, silent, still, and present, as if she had been born to care for him. That morning, under a pale sky and the soft rustle of fig leaves, Kitto stood with a warm bottle of formula in one hand, Leo bundled securely in the other. He paused at the edge of the nursery's shaded path, considering the next step. It was time. They had spoken about it among the team. No risks, no contact without supervision. But something deeper than logic whispered through the leaves that day. Trust. Not blind trust. Not human trust. The kind born of silence and shared breath. The kind the wild still remembers when words get in the way. Kitto stepped forward, cradling Leo with the same care a mother might give a newborn. He approached the familiar spot, where the wire mesh partition met the smooth stone floor. The place where Amaya had sat every morning without fail. She was already there. Amaya sat cross-legged, her back straight, her eyes calm. She did not pace. She did not reach. She simply waited. When she saw Leo in Kitto's arms, she exhaled a slow breath and tilted her head slightly. Acknowledgement. Perhaps. Or invitation. Kitto crouched just outside the fence and gently set Leo on a thick pad of straw-lined cloth near the lower edge of the mesh. Leo mewed once, his tiny body wriggling instinctively toward the warmth on the other side. Kitto held out the bottle through a small rectangular opening built into the enclosure wall. And then, Amaya moved. Not with hunger, not with hesitation, with grace. She reached forward, both arms extended, palms turned upward like someone accepting an offering. Her fingers curled gently around the bottle, steadying it with practiced care. She pulled it closer, then reached through the mesh, tipping the bottle so the nipple aligned with Leo's mouth. Leo latched and drank. His paws flailed at first, then pressed softly into the fence. Amaya remained completely still. Her eyes softened. She braced the bottle with one hand, and with the other, she reached lower, cradling the base of Leo's tiny body through the mesh. She was not feeding a lion cub. She was holding a life. And Leo responded. His purring began, faint but unmistakable, a vibration of contentment. He pressed closer, tiny claws brushing the wire until they found something solid, her hand. And then, in a motion so small that no one would have noticed unless they were holding their breath, Leo wrapped his paw around one of Amaya's fingers. His claws did not pierce. They held, and Amaya froze. Then, slowly, she bent forward. She touched her forehead gently to the fence. Her brow aligned with the space where Leo's head leaned. For a moment, the mesh disappeared. They were simply mother and child, sharing breath, scent, and silence. Behind them, two caretakers watched from a distance. They didn't speak, not because they didn't know what to say, but because they knew. There were no words for this. No policy to cover it. No protocol to explain how an infertile ape and an orphaned lion cub had found each other through steel, sorrow, and instinct. It was simply happening, a miracle unfolding one breath at a time. After the feeding, Kitto gently lifted Leo into his arms again. The cub resisted slightly, his paw lingering on the fence. Amaya did not reach out. She only watched him go, her hands resting in her lap, her chest rising and falling with measured breath. Later, as the staff reviewed the footage, the moment passed again in front of them. Amaya feeding Leo with both hands, Leo holding her finger, and the head-to-head gesture that needed no explanation. A still frame was saved. It showed Amaya's eyes half closed in peace, and Leo, wrapped in blanket and shadow, held not by wire, but by presence. They pinned the photo on the bulletin board in the central office. Underneath it, someone wrote, "The first embrace." That night, as the last lights in the facility dimmed and the sky deepened into a velvety black, Kitto sat at his desk, updating the day's records. Under behavioral notes, he paused, then typed, observed, first coordinated feeding through mesh. Leo willingly engaged. Amaya exhibited maternal behavior, support, cradling, grooming mimic, physical connection through mesh confirmed. He paused again, then added one more line. Staff remained silent, not from doubt, from awe. In the enclosure, Amaya lay on her side, arms loosely curled around a bundle of straw and twine. She didn't rock it that night. She simply rested. Her breath was even, her face relaxed, and for the first time in years, she didn't reach for the old palm frond doll in the corner. She had already held something real. The days that followed were unlike anything the staff at Majani Wildlife Rescue Center had ever witnessed. After weeks of closely monitored interaction and carefully supervised feedings, the decision was made. Leo and Amaya would share a specially modified enclosure, constructed beside Amaya's original habitat, with transparent partitions, sensory enrichment zones, and medical access points. At first, there was hesitation from the staff, not the pair, but as always, Amaya seemed to know what to do. She accepted Leo not as a fragile cub, but as something she had been waiting for, something her arms, her silence, her empty space had always longed to protect. And Leo, he responded as only the young and unshaped can, with full trust. No hesitation, and pure imitation. By the end of the first week, Amaya was no longer simply a caretaker. She had become Leo's world. She fed him every morning with bottles warmed by the staff, holding him carefully in her arms as he drank, always using both hands as if he were something sacred. She burped him softly against her shoulder, rubbed his back when he twitched in his sleep, and rocked him through thunderstorms until he calmed. When Leo cried in the night, it was Amaya who stirred first. She would curl around him, one long arm covering his side like a blanket, and hum softly, the same whistling sound she'd made the first day they met. She became his home, and Leo began to grow. At 3 months old, his steps were wobbly but determined. He chased insects through the grass and clawed at soft toys made of hemp and rags. But most remarkable of all was how he began to mirror Amaya. It started subtly, when Amaya sat on a stump and clapped her hands together in play. Leo sat beside her and tried to do the same, slapping his front paws together awkwardly. When she tapped her chest gently in thought, Leo copied the motion, puzzled at first, then delighted when she whistled in approval. Soon, it became routine. He followed her posture. He mimicked her hoots and chirps with growls and clicks of his tongue. He tried walking upright, his back legs stiff and unsure, but with eyes wide with pride. By the end of the second month in the shared enclosure, Leo had learned to balance on two legs for several steps. He would puff out his tiny chest and wobble toward Amaya, who always greeted him with soft claps and nuzzles. They played for hours. One of their favorite games was leaf hide. A caretaker would scatter broad banana leaves around the enclosure. Amaya would hide small treats or stones beneath them, and Leo would sniff them out, often flipping them with exaggerated leaps and triumphant roars. Amaya would pretend to be shocked, throwing her arms up dramatically, sending Leo into fits of wild, joyous purring. It was more than play. It was learning. It was bonding. It was something deep and mysterious, like watching the wild teach itself how to be whole. Unbeknownst to the team, one of the volunteers had been filming small clips of the pair each morning, Amaya nursing Leo. Leo walking clumsily after her. Both of them curled beneath the same tree at sunset. She posted a 2-minute compilation online, titled, "Ape and Lion, An Unexpected Love." It went viral in under a day. Within a week, news agencies around the world were calling the rescue center. Journalists from Nairobi, Cape Town, and London requested interviews. Scientists wanted to study the footage. Behaviorists emailed daily. "What is this?" they asked. "Is this real?" Kito was chosen to speak for the center. He wore his forest ranger uniform, sat on a simple bench outside the enclosure with Amaya and Leo playing in the background, and faced the camera calmly. "This wasn't taught," he said. "We didn't train Amaya to care for a cub. We didn't train Leo to follow her like a sibling or a child." He paused. "We simply let instinct do what it was made to do." The video aired globally. People around the world watched as a childless ape cared for an orphaned lion like her own. They saw Leo clumsily mimicking her movements, rolling in the grass beside her, hugging her leg like a sibling might cling to an older sister. In New York, a professor showed the clip in a primatology class. In Tokyo, it was played on a morning talk show, and the hosts cried. In remote villages across Africa, farmers gathered to watch on community TVs powered by solar panels, murmuring in wonder. Back at Majani, little changed. For Amaya and Leo, the world's gaze meant nothing. They had no concept of virality, of borders, of fame. They only had each other. One late afternoon, as golden light flooded the enclosure, Leo dragged a blanket across the grass and dropped it at Amaya's feet. She looked down, puzzled. He placed his paw on her knee, then curled up on the blanket, facing her. eyes heavy. Amaya sat down slowly, brushed a few specks of dirt from his fur, and leaned forward, touching her head to his for a long moment. Kito watched from his usual post and whispered under his breath, "That's not mimicry anymore. It's love." But even in miracles, time moves forward, and outside the walls of their shared world, nature continued its cycle. Leo was growing faster than any lion cub should in captivity. His legs were stronger, his teeth sharper, his instincts, though quieted, began to hum beneath his fur. The staff knew, Kito knew, even Amaya seemed to know, that the miracle would not last forever. But for now, they had these days when the savanna wind passed through the trees like a lullaby. Days when the lion and the ape sat side by side under the sky. No cage between them, no fear, just breath and belonging. By the time Leo turned 5 months old, the change was unmistakable. The once fragile cub, small enough to sleep in a caretaker's palm, now padded across the enclosure with the confidence of something ancient. His shoulders had broadened, his teeth had come in sharp and white, his paws struck the earth with intention, and his gaze had taken on the focus of a hunter. And then there were the claws. Not just tiny hooks anymore, but curved, dangerous tools, visible even when retracted, flashing in the light when he pounced too hard during play or tore through a hanging enrichment toy meant for baby baboons. It was time. Kito had been preparing for weeks. But no amount of training made it easier. Majani's protocols were clear. Once a predator began to show signs of full development, behavioral cues, muscle tone, prey drive, the rehabilitation phase must begin. Leo would undergo wilderness preparation. He would be reintroduced to hunting behaviors using scent trails, moving decoys, and soft release areas. The final goal: reintegration into a protected reserve where he could live wild, as nature had intended. But for Amaya, none of this could be explained. She watched the changes happen. She saw him grow. And though she did not protest or panic, something in her eyes dimmed, as if she could feel the distance approaching. For the last few weeks of their time together, the staff allowed Leo and Amaya more space, still supervised, but uninterrupted. Amaya no longer tried to groom Leo. Instead, she watched, from a short distance, sometimes perched in her tree platform, other times sitting in the grass, back turned but ears always listening. Leo still curled up beside her at night. But some nights, he lay just a little farther away. Amaya never followed. She accepted. That was her final gift. On the morning of the separation, the sky over Majani was heavy with early clouds. Kito waited by the transport gate, leash in hand. Although it wasn't needed, Leo walked beside him willingly, tail swaying low, head level. He didn't resist, but he knew. The enclosure had been split again. The shared space no longer open. A narrow corridor connected their paths, one final meeting point. On one side, Leo. On the other, Amaya. She was waiting. No food. No toys. Just stillness. Kito unclipped the safety gate. Leo stepped forward. The two came face to face through the thin metal grid. No one else moved. No one spoke. Leo didn't pace or paw. He lowered his head, and with impossible gentleness, he pressed his brow to the fence, aligning it with Immerse, as he had done so many times before. But this time, they both held still, for seconds, then a minute, as if memorizing each other's breath, as if burning scent into soul. Kitto turned away. He couldn't watch anymore. Hours later, the transport vehicle rolled through the reserve gates, leaving behind the home that had raised Leo, and the spirit that had loved him. The wild reserve, tens of thousands of acres of protected land, with no tourist lodges, no crowds, no noise, just grass, trees, prey, and distance. Leo stepped from the transport cage onto soil he had never seen, but somehow recognized. A ranger at the site unclipped the final lock. The door opened. Leo stood in the frame for a moment, unmoving. Then the wind blew. He lifted his nose, sniffed, and ran, not away, but forward, into the wild. Back at Majani, silence settled again. Amaya returned to her enclosure. Her habits resumed, the soft grooming of palm fronds, the occasional claps for attention. But she didn't play as often. She didn't sit by the enrichment tunnel, except at sunset. Each evening, just as the sky began to bleed orange, Amaya walked to the corner of the old enclosure where she and Leo had first shared quiet. She sat, faced west, and whistled, the same soft, high-pitched sound. Once, then again. The caretakers didn't interrupt. They knew. She wasn't calling for a cub. She was calling for a memory. Or maybe, for a presence she could still feel on the wind. One afternoon, Kitto passed by and stood a few meters away. Arms crossed, eyes tired. "You miss him, don't you?" he said quietly. Amaya didn't turn, but she whistled once more. Weeks passed, then months, and one morning, as the dew still clung to the grass, a report came in from the reserve. Tracks, fresh lion prints near a watering hole. Alone, strong, and beside them, crushed leaves. As if someone had sat there, still, watching, listening. No photo was taken, no name written, but Kitto smiled when he heard. And when he passed by Amaya's corner that evening, she was already there, back straight, head high, waiting. And when the wind shifted just right, her whistle floated far across the trees, not a cry of loss, but a welcome, because some souls are never gone. They just change landscapes. And some bonds do not break. They return, in silence, in wind, in memory.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.